The message came quietly, but its meaning was devastating. A private call, a single sentence, and Zara Tindall's world changed forever. She was a royal by blood, a woman of strength. But no amount of composure could prepare her for this. The news? Heartbreaking. The consequences? Irreversible. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began on an otherwise unremarkable night. Zara, unaware of the storm approaching, was at home with her family when the phone rang. The voice on the other end was calm, deliberate, but the words cut like ice. It wasn't an official letter, nor a public announcement. It was a quiet warning, delivered through back channels too polished to be accidental. The message? Your role is under review. That was all. No explanation, no reasoning. Just a statement cloaked in ambiguity, yet unmistakably final. Her inner circle immediately sensed a shift. Something had changed, something deep, structural, and planned. At first, confusion clouded everything. Zara had never asked for power. She had never demanded privilege. She had always walked the line between royal tradition and private freedom with integrity. But now, she was being evaluated like a chess piece, her presence on the board no longer guaranteed. Was this a mistake, a reshuffling, or something far more deliberate? The questions came fast, the answers slow. What Zara felt in that moment was more than just uncertainty. It was a cold undercurrent of betrayal. Not loud, not personal, but institutional. The kind that doesn't yell, it erases. And as the hours passed and silence replaced clarity, she realized something chilling. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a decision, and it had already been made. But to understand why this moment broke her, we must first understand the pressure Zara was never meant to carry. Zara Tindall was never given a title, but she was never free of the crown's shadow either. Her life was carefully balanced between royal blood and ordinary life. But that tightrope walk was never hers to choose, and now it was beginning to crack beneath her. From birth, Zara was held up as the example of how to exist outside the gold-tinged cage of royalty, while still remaining inside the palace walls. Her mother, Princess Anne, had made a bold choice. No titles, no formal roles, no royal obligations. It was meant to offer freedom, a chance for Zara to build her identity on her own terms, away from the weight of monarchy. And for years, it worked. She found her power in sport, not in tradition, earning global acclaim as an Olympic equestrian. To the public, she was a beacon of independence, a modern royal who didn't need ceremony to prove her worth. But inside the palace, the lines were never that clear. Zara was still expected to show up, smile, support, and serve when it suited the crown. She walked through royal doors as family, yet often stood at the edge of the frame when history was being documented. There was always a cost. And lately, that cost had begun to feel like surveillance. Her appearances were noted, her distance was discussed, and what once felt like freedom now began to feel like a test she didn't know she was taking. The public's affection for Zara had never wavered, but inside the walls of royal strategy, affection was rarely enough. Quiet reports suggested meetings had been held, conversations behind closed doors about relevance, image, and legacy. Zara, once thought untouchable by the politics of the firm, was no longer being protected. She was being studied. Her independence, once praised, was now seen as unpredictable. And just beneath the surface, something darker was forming. A shift, a silence. And in that silence, Zara could feel it, her place was not as secure as it once seemed. And then came the whispers of something changing inside the palace. A plan, a list, a reckoning. It was called Operation Reset, a confidential royal review of who would and wouldn't be part of the monarchy's future. Zara's name was on that list, but not the way anyone expected. Behind closed doors, under the guise of modernizing the crown, a quiet purge was underway. The aim was simple: consolidate the firm's image, streamline its ranks, and project a tighter, more controlled version of royalty. The monarchy had been bruised by scandal, by departure, by disconnection from its people. Now, it wanted discipline, predictability, loyalty, and in that cold recalibration, Zara Tindall became a target. The list, leaked to select insiders, revealed names under scrutiny, those deemed non-essential or incongruent with the strategic future. Among them, Zara, a granddaughter of a queen, a public figure who had never asked for a title but had carried the burden of royalty all the same. According to one source, the assessment was clinical. Zara's public life, her equestrian fame, her lack of royal engagements, it all amounted to one line: profile inconsistent with projected royal image. It didn't matter that she had never failed the crown. What mattered now was narrative, control, branding, and Zara didn't fit. The most brutal part? She wasn't informed until the review was already in its final phase. No consultation, no warning. Just a quiet realization, passed through whispers and second-hand confirmations, that her future with the firm was being written without her. She was no longer the woman who existed freely between two worlds. She was now being forcibly pushed out of one. Those close to her say the betrayal ran deep, not because she wanted more from the monarchy, but because it had always claimed not to want anything from her. And yet, here it was, making a decision that would define how she was seen, remembered, and treated. She wasn't being thanked for her loyalty. She was being erased from relevance. Cold strategy disguised as necessity. And in Zara's silence, there was something louder than outrage. There was heartbreak. But if being excluded was painful, what came next would be publicly humiliating. For the first time in 2 decades, Zara was left off the guest list. A major royal event, one that honored her grandfather's legacy, and she was nowhere to be seen. To the world, it looked like a snub. To Zara, it felt like exile. The plans had been circulating for weeks. A solemn, high-profile royal gathering meant to honor history, continuity, and family legacy. Names were quietly confirmed. Seating charts whispered about. And then the absence became impossible to ignore. Zara Tindall, granddaughter of the monarch being honored, a constant presence at royal milestones for most of her life, was missing. No explanation followed. No quiet reassurance, just silence. The media noticed immediately. Royal correspondents questioned how someone so deeply tied to the family narrative could suddenly be excluded. Was it an oversight? Or something far more deliberate? Behind palace walls, insiders suggested it was intentional, a calculated omission meant to reinforce a new hierarchy. Mike Tindall, usually unflappable, was said to be furious, privately questioning how loyalty could be repaid with erasure. For Zara, the impact was devastating. This wasn't just about missing an event. It was about being written out of a story she had lived her entire life inside. Behind closed doors, those closest to her described a moment of emotional collapse, years of restraint finally giving way. She had supported the crown without condition, never demanding recognition, never challenging authority. And yet, when legacy was being honored, she was deemed unnecessary. The symbolism was brutal. To be absent from a moment honoring her grandfather felt like a final message. Your place here is no longer assumed. What made it worse was the public speculation. Every headline, every panel discussion turned her pain into analysis, and the palace said nothing. No correction, no clarification, just confirmation through silence. For Zara, that silence spoke louder than any statement ever could. And just when Zara tried to retreat from the public eye, another story leaked, and this one cut even deeper. It wasn't an outsider who leaked Zara's pain to the press, it was someone close. Someone who once sat at her table, laughed with her children. And when she found out, the heartbreak became betrayal. What had started as a slow drip of palace exclusion suddenly turned into a media storm. A tabloid headline splashed across morning front pages claimed to reveal Zara Tindall's private reaction to being left off the royal guest list. But this wasn't speculation. These were exact quotes, personal reflections, late-night tears, even private words exchanged between Zara and Mike. The betrayal wasn't just public, it was intimate. Within hours, Zara knew this hadn't come from a reporter digging through scraps. This came from someone inside, someone who had access, someone she had trusted. A quiet inquiry behind the scenes confirmed her worst fear. A friend, not just a friend, someone inside the wider royal orbit, a person close enough to be considered family. The realization shattered her. Her grief had already been publicized through silence. Now, her heartbreak was dissected, monetized, and devoured by the press. Worse still, the leak created ripples far beyond Zara's own circle. Extended cousins grew distant, unsure who might be implicated. Even long-standing friendships began to fray. Trust eroded. Rooms once filled with laughter became silent, cautious arenas. Zara, known for her composure and strength, now carried something else. Restraint born from knowing eyes were everywhere. Every word, every glance could be repackaged and sold. But the emotional damage ran deeper than public scandal. This was a woman who had never asked to be a working royal, who had walked the line between crown and civilian with grace. And now, her most vulnerable moment had been weaponized. A betrayal like this doesn't just change relationships, it changes how a person walks through the world. Zara's circle would never be the same again, and neither would she. But one thing the firm underestimated: Zara Tindall does not suffer in silence. For years, Zara stayed silent. But this time, she didn't. A calculated move, a single interview redefined the royal narrative. She didn't name names. She didn't have to. The message was crystal clear. I know what you did. After months of whispers and silent wounds, Zara Tindall did something unprecedented. She accepted a sit-down interview with one of the UK's most respected, high-profile journalists. No tabloids. No palace filters. Just her, a chair, and a truth she was finally ready to hint at. From the opening moments, the tone was different. Controlled, yet raw. Not a word wasted. She never once used the word betrayal, but it hovered like a storm cloud in every pause. She didn't accuse. She revealed, not with facts, but with something more powerful implication. Her references to being controlled in rooms I didn't ask to enter, and punished for being dignified, sliced through the nation's collective conscience. She spoke of silence, not as peace, but as a weapon. Loyalty, she said, had limits, and those limits had been tested. British media exploded. Analysts dissected every phrase, every look, every breath. Who was she referring to when she said, "Family should shield, not shadow"? Was institutional loyalty a jab at Buckingham Palace, or at someone even closer? The palace refused to comment standard protocol, but in doing so, they poured gasoline on the fire. The silence, once a shield, became an admission, and the public knew it. Sympathy surged. Zara's restraint became her weapon, her composure, her credibility. She wasn't screaming for attention. She didn't need to. The nation heard her loud and clear. Talk shows debated whether she was signaling a greater royal rift. Editorials framed her as the modern woman the monarchy failed to protect. Her name, once a footnote in royal affairs, now sat at the center of the storm. But beneath the applause and viral clips, there was something deeper, a quiet reckoning. Zara had reclaimed her voice, yes, but she had also sent a message to the very rooms that once shut her out. I know, and I will not disappear. But while Zara reclaimed her voice, a voice from the past surfaced to stand by her side, and it wasn't who anyone expected. Princess Anne is known for restraint, but insiders say when she found out how Zara had been treated, her reaction was anything but quiet. Behind palace doors, Anne's fury left even senior aides rattled. The moment the full weight of Zara's exclusion reached Anne, something inside her snapped. She had endured decades of royal politics with military-grade discipline, quietly absorbing every slight, every snub, every whispered dismissal, but this wasn't about her. This was about her daughter. And that changed everything. In a private, unrecorded meeting with top royal advisors, Anne reportedly unleashed what one insider described as scorched earth. There were no courtesies, no soft landings. She demanded names. She demanded answers. She didn't ask for clarification. She demanded retribution. Zara's achievements, her Olympic silver, her dignified public record, her unwavering loyalty were thrown on the table like evidence in a courtroom. Anne didn't just defend Zara's worth. She challenged the very idea that this new version of the monarchy had the moral authority to judge it. Her voice, sharp as it ever was in the Royal Marines command briefings, cut through the thick fabric of palace etiquette. One source claimed she even threatened to withdraw from public royal duties if a formal explanation wasn't issued. No spin, no half-truths, just justice. For years, the mother-daughter duo had walked separate paths. Anne, bound by duty, Zara, protected by distance. But in that moment, their paths merged into a single force. Anne, always the outlier in the firm, had drawn a line in the sand, and behind it stood her daughter, no longer alone. That confrontation wasn't just a defense of Zara, it was a condemnation of the palace's selective memory. Anne reminded the room who Zara really was, the granddaughter the Queen had quietly adored, the equestrian champion who never traded her name for scandal, the royal who asked for nothing and gave everything. It wasn't a plea for inclusion, it was a declaration of worth. But while Anne's rage echoed through the palace corridors, it was something else entirely that would shift the ground beneath them. Something fragile, something handwritten, something the Queen herself had once kept hidden from view. But it wasn't fury alone that would change everything, it was what came next, buried in the Queen's personal archives. Found tucked inside a handwritten journal belonging to Queen Elizabeth II, a note about Zara unpublished, unseen until now, and in it, the monarch's private thoughts reveal a truth the palace had tried to forget. It wasn't part of any official archive. It wasn't a press-ready statement, carefully drafted by palace aides. It was a personal entry, dated just 2 months before Her Majesty's passing, scrawled in the familiar looping hand of Britain's longest reigning monarch. And within that quiet page was something that would shift the story completely. Royal archivists stumbled upon the document during a routine curation of the Queen's personal effects journals, meant for private reflection, not public consumption. But one line stood out, underlined in faded ink. Zara has always been the beating heart of our private family, the one who needed no crown to carry our legacy. There it was undeniable, heartfelt, raw, a declaration not from protocol, but from love. The Queen saw Zara for what she truly was, a symbol of dignity, not defined by pomp, but by grace in the absence of grandeur. There were no disclaimers, no qualifications, only admiration. And when that note leaked just a single paragraph, the world erupted. Social media exploded with calls to recognize Zara's role. Newspapers questioned why someone held in such esteem by the late Queen had been so easily cast aside. Commentators, even those usually loyal to the palace narrative, couldn't ignore the seismic weight of the revelation. The phrase, beating heart, trended for days. But for Zara, it was more than a media storm. When she read the words, she reportedly broke down, not out of shock, but out of release. Finally, something that validated the sacrifices she had made, the silences she had endured. A note of love that wasn't performative, but personal. For years, she had walked behind the royal procession, never quite in step, but never truly apart. And now, the Queen's own pen had bridged that divide. A royal biographer, usually measured and analytical, called it the most emotionally potent royal document since Diana's letters. Not because it was scandalous, but because it told the truth the public always suspected. That not all value in the monarchy comes with a title. The palace issued no comment, hoping perhaps the storm would pass. But the truth had already taken root. There were whispers of reconsideration, of quiet invitations to rejoin select events. Not as a working royal, but as a figure of moral authority, someone whose very exclusion had exposed what the firm had become and what it had lost. And suddenly, the woman who had been pushed to the margins was once again standing at the center of the monarchy's conscience. She didn't ask for titles. She didn't seek power. But through heartbreak, betrayal, and silence, Zara Tindall became something no one expected, a symbol of what royalty should be. And now, the monarchy must face the mirror she's held up to it. Zara's journey wasn't the one scripted for fairy tales or palace-approved biographies. It wasn't paved in jewels or marked by coronets. It was written in quiet sacrifices, in the pauses where cameras didn't flash, and in the spaces the crown forgot to acknowledge. Yet somehow, those absences spoke louder than any royal decree. In a world obsessed with rank and ribbon, she became an emblem of something more elusive, dignity, unshaken by rejection. And as the public began to understand the full weight of her exclusion, something extraordinary happened. A wave of support, not driven by sympathy, but by recognition, swept across the country. People saw their own stories in hers, overlooked, underestimated, and unbent. The narrative shifted, not because Zara sought the spotlight, but because her silence had echoed too long. And now, the palace could no longer ignore it. As conversations swirled around the future of the monarchy, its relevance, its structure, its soul, Zara's name came up not as a cautionary tale, but as a missed opportunity. Her quiet grace, her loyalty even when wounded, her refusal to scandalize or retaliate, they all stood in stark contrast to the noise that often clouded royal affairs. Advisors reportedly urged a reassessment of how the firm handles those who walk the royal line without stepping on its stage. The days of sidelining individuals based on roles crafted generations ago were, perhaps, numbered. And through it all, Zara remained measured, gracious, but not unchanged. She no longer navigated those halls with the same trust. The boundaries were drawn now not in anger, but in understanding. She knew where she stood. More importantly, she knew where she didn't. Mike Tindall, often in the background, emerged as a quiet pillar throughout the storm. Never loud, never performative, but steady. The public took notice. Their marriage, once seen as footnote royal romance, began to feel like a model of something real, partnership without performance. Zara's legacy, once thought to be bound by horse tracks and charity circuits, now carried the weight of something deeper. She embodied the truth the crown tries to obscure, that worth is not measured in titles. It's measured in how one stands when the palace doors close and no one is watching. Her story, etched in pain and perseverance, offered something the monarchy desperately needed: reflection. A reminder that the institution may carry tradition, but individuals carry integrity. This was never just about a house or a title. This was about identity. And in losing what she thought she needed, Zara Tindall found something far more powerful: her voice. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.